Luke and welcome to Down from the Attic, Modern Classics. In these reviews I'll look at modern board games that you might not have heard of but are well worth checking out. In this episode we're looking at a brand new game from Ravensburger based on a 1975 classic film, Jaws. Let's get this thing down and have a look at it. If you've been living under a rock for the past 4 decades, Jaws is an action horror film from 1975 directed by Steven Spielberg. It was Spielberg's 3rd feature film at the time, and the one that really propelled him into the spotlight. The audience reaction to this story of a great white shark terrorising the residents of Amity Island was huge. This was the film that coined the phrase summer blockbuster, and decades later, Jaws is an incredibly enjoyable film to watch. Admittedly, when I first heard about this game, it definitely raised an eyebrow. A board game based on Jaws? How on earth is that going to work? And the answer is, surprisingly well. This is a game for 2 to 4 players, and it's a game of 2 sides, the shark hunters and the shark. The game is literally a game of 2 sides too, as it's played in 2 acts, the Amity Island stage and the Orca stage. First of all, presentation. The box art is the iconic Jaws poster, and who's going to argue with that? It's fantastic. The art for the board and the play pieces are very nice and atmospheric too. The board itself is quite small, but at no point does it feel like we're struggling for space playing. It's as large as it needs to be. The play cards have scenes from the film and quotes at the bottom. Not needed at all, but it's there for those die-hard Jaws fans, and it's a welcome inclusion. The font pick for the cards has this very vintage retro style to it, definitely playing into the time that Jaws was filmed. Details such as the swimmers' costumes and inflatables further drive this home. The play pieces are all made of wood, a standard thing for Ravensburger games, and there's no denying their charm. I do love the little Jaws play piece and the little wooden orca. In Jaws the board game, you loosely play out the story of Jaws the film. As mentioned before, the game has 2 acts to it. Starting the game, one person assumes the role of Jaws, Bruce if you want to be really nerdy and call the shark by its proper name, and the other players assume the roles of Police Chief Martin Brody, Oceanographer Matt Hooper, and the local shark hunter Quint. Playing 2 players, one player will control Jaws and the other all 3 human characters. The shark's objective is to eat as many swimmers as it can whilst avoiding detection. On the shark stats card, there's a slider on the side that marks out the number of people eaten, and this plays massively into the second part of the game. More on this soon. The human's objective is to protect the people of Amity, prevent Jaws from eating people, and attach 2 tracking beacons to Jaws. If 2 tracking beacons are attached to Jaws, or Jaws eats 10 humans, Act 1 ends and Act 2 begins. The player playing as Jaws marks their starting location on the shark tracker. This is done at the very start of the game, so Jaws or the hunters have no unfair advantage. The board is divided into 13 segments. The shark tracker lists 12 of these spots. Jaws can't go on land naturally. A round in Act 1 plays as follows. An event card is played, the shark makes its turn, and then the crew. Turning over an event card, it will tell you which area of the map swimmers are going to head into the waters and how many swimmers. These event cards also have certain actions that last only for that round, so the crew might get another turn, or the shark may be able to move further. They're pretty balanced, and where one round might not benefit you, there's one where you'll have an advantage over your foe. After the swimmers have been added, time for Jaws to make his move. Jaws has up to 3 actions. He can choose to move or choose to eat a swimmer. Jaws is always underwater, he's never seen, and only the act of seeing a swimmer disappear off the board indicates where he is, or may have been. Jaws also has these tokens which you can opt to play at the start of his turn. These are all one-use powers, but making good use of them can be devastating, especially choosing to eat all swimmers at a particular beach. Once Jaws has finished his turn, it's on to the crew, and this is where the game gets quite strategic. Hooper, Brody and Quint will have to work together as a team to snag 2 barrels onto Jaws. However, each of them have their own unique abilities and equipment that can help all 3. Each human character gets up to 4 actions, 1 more than Jaws. Brody, being the chief of police, can use his binoculars at any of the 4 beaches on Amity to spot Jaws. If correct, the player playing Jaws has to reveal to the humans that he is in fact at that beach. Brody can also close the beach for 2 turns, meaning that all swimmers are lifted off that segment and are out of harm's way. This can be incredibly useful when after a few event cards there's multiple swimmers at multiple beaches. Remember, you're trying to stop these people ending up as shark food. Brody's other action is picking up and dropping off barrels at the docks either side of the island. Brody is stuck to moving on the island. He cannot get on the boats, but his role is key to supplying Quint and Hooper barrels to track Jaws as they cannot move inland. Hooper has the option of moving 2 spaces per action as he has the fastest speedboat. He can pick up swimmers out of the water and also barrels too to supply to Quint. This is in addition to picking up barrels from the docks. Hooper also has the very useful fish finder ability. Hooper can place the fish finder on the square they are in, and this acts as a sonar for finding Jaws. The squares immediately adjacent to the place square are the range of the scanner, diagonal not included. If Jaws is on the exact square the fish finder is, Jaws has to let the crew players know that they were right. If Jaws is on one of the adjacent squares, they say, "I'm close by," and if they're out of range, "I'm not close by." And now on to Quint. Quint is in the Orca, and Quint has some interesting abilities. First of all, like the film, Quint is the only character who can launch and attach the barrels to Jaws from the Orca. This is done by knowing exactly where Jaws is and launching a barrel. Remember, we're aiming to attach 2 barrels to Jaws. The barrels are important anyway. They act as beacons for tracking Jaws. If Jaws moves into a space with a beacon, they have to announce they have activated a beacon, and with multiple in the water, they have to announce which ones they have alerted. They can give the crew an idea of where Jaws might be in the waters. However, Jaws chooses how they wish to give this information. This all gives the game a feel of cat and mouse. You can have a rough idea of where Jaws could be. Sometimes you let him slip through your grasp, but the satisfaction of finding him and attaching a barrel is unparalleled, especially as a group effort. Quint and Hooper can pick up and launch barrels, so it's almost like a net that's constantly moving, constantly trying to find Jaws. You never quite know if lifting a barrel out of the water is going to help or hinder you. The crew can choose who to use first round by round, so it might be beneficial to use Brody first one turn, but another turn Quint might be the best. This is a thinking game, and for a small game, there's a surprising depth to the strategy, and I love figuring out the best play to track and tag Jaws. Playing as Jaws, there's a real sinister glee to eating swimmers and narrowly avoiding detection. It's a real game of cat and mouse, and it's satisfying to play on both sides. As mentioned, Jaws has a tracker on his card to indicate how many people he's eaten. Getting 10 kills immediately ends Act 1, as does attaching 2 barrels to Jaws. Jaws will want to eat as many swimmers as possible because this garners him more shark ability cards for Act 2. The crew will want to tag Jaws as quickly as possible and with as few casualties as they can, because the lower the deaths, the more crew gear they get. This is a really nice system, and it puts the onus on you performing well in the first act to give you more of a chance in Act 2. The first time playing this game, I was so focused on tracking and tagging Jaws that I neglected the swimmers, and it was a bloodbath. This gave me very little equipment for Act 2, and you'll see why this is so important. Act 2. First thing to do is flip the board over and add the cards that build up the Orca. This is the iconic finale where Quint, Brody and Hooper battle Jaws, and this is going to get tense. The aim for the crew is to kill Jaws, bring his health to 0. Jaws is trying to kill the crew, either by eating them or completely destroying the Orca. Whatever crew gear cards the crew managed to acquire in Act 1 are distributed fairly between the crew members. Jaws also gets whatever shark ability cards they have earned. Crew members have their own gear too, so when the earned gear is used up, crew can still effectively deal damage to Jaws. Before starting round 2, the crew chooses one of the 8 spaces on the Orca. A round in Act 2 consists of 6 steps. First, 3 resurface cards are drawn and put in the A, B and C spots on the bottom. At this point, the crew have the option of moving 2 spaces. Add the corresponding tokens to the appropriate Orca spaces. Jaws is going to resurface at one of these 3 spots. The Jaws player, using their A, B and C tokens, selects in secret which they will surface and attack from. Next, the crew will make a guess to which one of these 3 spaces Jaws will surface from. They place these little target markers on the area they think Jaws will attack.
The crew then choose their weapons in the prepare stage. These can be from their own crew gear or the ones they've earned. There's bats, harpoons, barrels, chum, pistols, rifles, and knowing which to choose and when to use it is absolutely crucial. The crew select their weapons and then the shark reveals its location. And if your crew have picked a melee weapon and the wrong attack spot, they do absolutely nothing. They're swinging at thin air. However, if they have correctly selected the right spot and are within striking distance of the shark, they get to attack. Ranged weapons like the harpoon gun and the rifle can fire from any square on the deck. How the damage is calculated is as follows. Your weapons card will tell you how many dice to roll. The resurface card Jaws chose shows the evade value, so if you roll a 5 with your dice and Jaws has an evade value of 2, you score 3 damage on Jaws, and Jaws moves his little points marker. Using the correct equipment and guessing correctly on the resurface options is absolutely crucial to dealing damage, and you'll need to work collaboratively to getting extreme damage. Like in the film, you can hook a barrel into Jaws and shoot at it to explode it, and this gives major damage but requires 2 team members working together. After the crew attacks, Jaws attacks, and this is where the game becomes really fun and frantic. Each segment of the orca has a roll to damage and a roll to destroy number printed on the card. The number of dice Jaws uses for attack is shown on the resurface card, so Jaws needs to think carefully and smartly about where to attack. There may be more people on one spot, but less dice to deal damage with. If the orca is damaged, the tile is flipped over and shows a visibly damaged and waterlogged section of the board. I absolutely love this. And as the game goes on, round by round, the orca will appear to sink and get smaller, and it's a mad scramble for any bit of deck that's still floating. As the boat sinks, there really is a desperate air to the crew and trying to inflict damage onto Jaws. You can feel the fins circling around you. When Jaws attacks, he can run the risk of knocking crew members into the water, and this leaves them really exposed. Climbing aboard again uses both movement turns, and you can't move further away from the previously attacked spot. You can only hope that this spot doesn't appear in the next 3 resurface options. Jaws can also opt to use their shark cards, and these can inflict severe damage on the orca and the crew. There's a wide variety of power-ups, and they all feel like a great threat. Gun and rifles require bullets, and once the bullets are used, the guns are useless. You really feel pained when you waste one of these. The end is a really scrappy battle between crew and the shark, both trying to damage the other as much as possible. When either the shark is dead or the crew or the orca is destroyed, the game is over.
Jaws is a massive surprise all round for me. Never would I have thought they'd make a Jaws licensed board game that closely follows the story of Jaws, but is actually as deep and strategic as this.
Whether playing as Jaws or playing as the crew, you feel part of the story, and with every character having unique abilities, you feel as though your input to the game is important. The crew have to work together, there's no other way to defeat Jaws, and it's fun coming up with strategies. And playing as Jaws, it's fun to thwart these attempts to track you or attack you. Sneaking around, eating and attacking the orca, it's a riot playing the baddie. Although it looks from the offset 3 against 1, at no point have I ever felt that this game feels unbalanced in that regard. The abilities and turn-taking feel very well balanced. Nothing has ever felt unfair. The sinking orca mechanic works wonderfully and reminds me of Escape from Atlantis. Everyone is scrabbling for whatever bit of deck is still afloat.
I really can't think what Ravensburger could have done to keep the game thematically close to Jaws, and to keep it as fun and as balanced. It really is a thinking game. Coming up with new strategies and seeing how they'll play out, whether you're playing as the crew or you're playing as Jaws, sneaking around and eating swimmers. It's an absolute must-have for Jaws fans, but for those of you who've never even watched Jaws, it's a great game anyway. This game does Jaws justice, and for that, I've got to recommend it. Well, as always, I'm Luke. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.